some reset ideas for business leaders. This Sunday evening, it's my privilege in welcoming distinguished speaker R.Gopalakrishnan, other dignitaries, and other participants from across the globe, and my dear colleagues. A hearty welcome, big and warm enough to encompass you all. To say we are thrilled to be with you all is an understatement, and we are delighted to offer the most hospitable welcome we can. It's a great day, and we have been planning and waiting for. And I request all participants to raise their hands in Zoom app and give likes in social media stream for our esteemed speaker and welcome him in a grand style. As famously said by Warren Buffett, someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree long time ago. Similarly, it's our fortune that we have only 52 years of corporate experience and 75 years of life wisdom to be shared with us by the Guru himself. In the last 60 odd days, I have had the pleasure of having many fireside chit chats with many of my friends across the globe, some of whom are business leaders, managing directors, CEOs, and the CFOs, and the so on. And one word which I have kept hearing from them again and again is the word the new normal. But according to me, this phrase, new normal, new favorite with many, is pathetically inadequate. It is as silly as playing cricket with hockey sticks. It's like tennis and Messi or football and Federer. From the history, the Great War, the Great Depression, the Great Recession in the year 2020, when we are facing the negativity, we have to crave the positivity. And we have to use the word great much often. It is the word great that we need to steal back and put into a positive life for 2020 and beyond. Instead of the overused and tragically inadequate new normal phraseology, I adamantly advocate that we enter into a period known as the Great Reset, if I may say so. The great danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, but it is the to act with yesterday's logic. This moment is calling us to reset as leaders, as organization, and as the entire human race collectively. Be brave and interrupt yesterday's logic. The next generation of business are being forged. The leader of the futures are stepping up. Great leaders are made in crisis, and innovations thrive in tough times. What is our new world? Unpredictable, uncertain, often harsh, often kind, and full of opportunity, but laden with tough challenges. So, what's a leader to do as we step back into a full time business? It requires a reset of our expectations, reset in our priorities, and a reset in how we spend our time. It's a basic law of physics, right? Remember Newton's law of motion, force and acceleration. The more force applied, the greater the acceleration of the pendulum and the distance it swings. We'll come back to somewhat balanced state. It has been a long overdue, but now it is unquestionably time to hit the reset button. This means we will need to accept, accept, and actively redesign. Now I request Akash Menon to kindly introduce our speaker for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Vyas. Good evening and a warm welcome to Mr. Gopalakrishnan and, of course, all of our members in the audience today. It is indeed a privilege for me to be introducing a man of such stature. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, born in 1945, completed his BSc in physics from St. Xavier's College in Kolkata. He thereafter went on to do his BTech honors from IIT Kharagpur and an advanced management program from Harvard Business School. He has held various positions in various corporates across from since 1967, when he was HLL's marketing function after joining Hindustan Lever as a trainee in the information technology department. From 1985 to 1991, he was the executive director of exports HLL and traveled widely all over the world. From 91 to 95, he had an opportunity to head as the chairman Unilever Arabia in Jeddah, a rewarding expatriate position in the Middle East. From 95 to 97, he was the managing director of Brook Bond Lipton India, the Unilever Food subsidiary, which was merged into HLL in March 1997. From 97 to 98, he was the vice chairman of Hindustan Lever Limited. From 98 till 2015, he was the director of Tata Sons Limited, which is the holding company of the Tata Group, India's leading business house. He has been professionally involved in various activities. As a member of the Tata Group Corporate Center, he was deeply engaged in the restructuring and renewal of the prestigious Tata Group. He was deeply involved since the mid-1990s with the shaping of HLL, India's largest FMCG company, through mergers, acquisitions, and reorganizations. He's worked on the reorganization of Unilever's interests in the Arabian Peninsula from 91 to 95 by merging three components into a strong local company, and has led a multinational team of managers across 15 nationalities. He led an export development and overseas market as vice president HLL, traveled and experienced in OECD countries, the Arab world, and the erstwhile Soviet Union. He's also had an aspect or a facet of public service engagement in his, of course, studied profile. In 1985, he was a member of the 8th Plan Working Group, the Ganguly Committee on India's Exports. In 96, he was the chairman of the CIA National Committee on Food and Agriculture. In 2003, he was the chairman of the CIA National Committee. From 2003 to 2009, he was a member of the Deepak Parekh Committee, the Rangarajan Committee, the National Knowledge Commission Working Group on Management Education, and the YKLR Committee. In 2010, he was the member of the National Innovation Council under the chairmanship of Mr. Sam Pitroda, advisor to the Prime Minister. And in 2015, he was a member of the Mission High Level Committee at the Atal Innovation Mission. He's also been the BMA Management Man of the Year and the president of the All India Management Association. Apart from this, he's written various books like How Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw Fermented Biocon, How TCS Built an Industry for India, Doodles on Leadership, The Made in India Manager, Six Lenses, What the CEO Really Wants from You, and books which have been written in Tamil, Hindi, and Marathi. With this, I welcome you, sir, and request you to take over the reins. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Menon, and earlier to your invitation from Udan Saluters. I'm sure there is a very distinguished panel of people in your audience. Rishikesh is a highly persuasive person, so when I thought of saying no, he forced me to say yes, but in a pleasant way, in a nice way. So I'm glad to be here. As Rishikesh mentioned in the beginning, these are unusual times. And in unusual times, you must act unusually. And if you have to act unusually, you must think unusually. You need to depart from the old way in which you kept thinking. And of course, you never think the old way was old because you get used to it. And then it's very difficult to break out of a cycle of thinking that you got used to. So during this long lockdown, almost 10 weeks now, I sat down and said, although I have now retired from active management leadership, what is it that I would think about having got a break like this, which I would think of applying with some experimentation when I get back to work. Sorry, beg your pardon. And at that time, I was reminded of the story of a Japanese person called Hiro Onada. I love telling this story because it is very, very picturesque. It sort of gets your mind thinking. Now you may ask, who's Hiro Onada? He's not a famous person. He's a person like you and I. He was born around 1920, and in 1940 he was a young man of 20 years of age, and it was considered good to do national service by joining the Japan Emperor's army. He joined a very elite corps of people who were given really tough tasks. And Hiro Onada, after due training at the age of 20 or 21, he was airlifted from Japan and dropped into the jungles of Philippines as his first assignment. And what he was told was, we have taught you everything there is to be taught. Now these are your tasks. Be alert, work hard, work sincerely, be of service to the emperor, and here's a gun, rifle, here's some rations, etc. And Hiro Onada, being an enthusiastic person, did that, starting in 1941-42. But although the war was over in 1945, he kept doing this till 1971. And finally in 1971, with more technology available to the Japanese, they came and found him in the jungle. And they said, hey, Hiro, what's happened? And he said, hey, how's the war going? They said, it's 30 years, the war is over. And he said, but nobody told me. He said, well, that's exactly the problem. So we have come to take you back to Japan. And then they gave him a nice reception, and he retired. And then he died about 7, 8, 10 years ago. And I happened to read his obituary, and that's how I stumbled on the story. Now, why this Hiro Onada story interests me is all of us managers, whether you're managers, lawyers, accountants, it doesn't matter. All of us professionals have a little bit of Hiro Onada in us. We are working very consciously, very hard, great dedication, but we are not updating ourselves with what's happening around us. Not because it's our fault, but because we have somewhere down the line got disconnected. I mean, it wasn't Hiro Onada's fault that he wasn't contacted. He just said, how am I to know? I'm sitting in the jungle. And so I love the story. And this is what I mean by the word reset. Because we have got set ways of thinking. And we work on those assumptions through our whole career. This break gives you the opportunity to rethink and reset your mind. And I listed 6 ideas for reset ideas, not all of which will be relevant to everybody, but some of which will be relevant to some people. Now, time may not permit me to go through all the 6, but it's better to do 3 or 4, whatever I can in the available time, comprehensively, than to do 6 in a very rushed manner. So I'm going to focus on these. And I need to tell you that apart from COVID giving us a break, what is it that has changed between the time, say, I started my career, which is 52 years ago, and today? You see, when we look at the history of business and management, we see that initially, long, long ago, it was organization that helped people to win. For example, the Kauravas beat the Pandavas, the Pandavas beat the Kauravas, not because they had better technology, not because they had better trained men, but because they were better organized to listen to advice and to implement and execute. When you see how the Romans fought with the Greeks or the Persians, it was again not a battle of, they all were fighting hand to hand. They were fighting with better organization, and whoever had the better organization won. And so the history of organized human effort has always been whoever is better organized gets to win. It is only in the last 100 years, I would say, in contrast to the Pandavas beating the Kauravas, or in contrast to the battle between the Romans and the Persians, think of the Second World War. The Allies won the war because of better technology. They could drop a bomb, and they knew the secret of the bomb. Otherwise, the war wouldn't have got over. So technology has come into our lives very quietly, and not all of us are conscious enough of it. We take it for granted. What are the implications of technology coming into your company or your business or your field of activity? That you are now rewarded for knowledge. Knowledge is what makes you different. And to acquire knowledge, you need to reset your mind that you're ignorant. If you come from the mindset, I have been practicing in this area, as a lawyer or an accountant or as a marketing person, I know much of what there is to know about this subject. And that happens to all of us. Huh? After 30 years, 20 years, you say, I have sab kuch malum hai. Then you are reluctant to admit, even to yourself, let alone to other people, that there is ignorance in you. And of course, that's the beginning of lack of knowledge. Because unless you're ignorant, unless you create the space, where will you fill in new knowledge? And so it is extremely important that the principle of ignorance and curiosity come to every professional's mindset. And that's the first reset that you need. Adopt an attitude and a mindset that too many things have changed. I am ignorant and I do need to acquire new knowledge. Whether it's directly, even in your state of income tax or laws, you see how things are changing. And if you don't have the principle of curiosity and ignorance, you're not going to be up to date. So having made this principle, and you'll see this principle running right through all the ideas that I might talk about today, I would like to give you my reset idea number one. Now please remember, don't expect some Manusmriti or Vedas. These are going to be ordinary ideas, but I'll be very surprised if many of you don't say, hey, that's not something I had thought about earlier. That's all I'm seeking to do. To tell you things that you are assumed to have noticed, but you may not have noticed. So the first reset idea I have, and I'm not going to use charts because I want to talk to you, person to person, eyeball to eyeball. The first, so if you want to jot it down or something, you can do so, or maybe Udan Saluters will be having a recording available later. The first reset idea I want to give you is relearn how to learn. If you've been around for 10, 20 years, you have probably unconsciously convinced yourself that you know much of what is required to be known. And it's just a small hop, step and jump to learn the few other things that you are a bit out of touch with. But actually that's not the case. You have to wipe the slate almost blank and start all over again. And that comes when you have the humility to admit that you're ignorant. And humility doesn't come for free. Humility has to be learned and taught. Because you're so proud of the fact that you had so many years. When I hear the introduction given by Mr. Menon a short while ago, you get the feeling that here is a Gyani. And when I finish this, I'll go back, wash my face and say, you're not a Gyani. You're going to learn something out of talking to Udan Saluter. So I also have an interest. Because somebody may ask a question which I have not thought about. And I hope that happens. I want to narrate a story about this relearning to learn. It sounds so obvious and pedestrian. So why should you spend any time for 10 minutes listening to a story? So I take you back about 30 years, 35 years. It was 1987. And I was appointed in those pre-liberalization days. I was appointed to the board of Hindustan Lever as the export director. And I was only 41 years of age. And if you can cast your mind back, many of you may not have been in business at that time. Pre-liberalization at 41 to be an export director of a valued and prestigious company called Hindustan Lever was a big deal. And the person getting appointed, like myself, wasn't quite unaware that it's a big deal. So you're a bit of gamandi. You're a bit conscious that you have achieved some success. And I must have been in that condition, though the people who are a bit arrogant or proud don't want to admit it. Now time has gone and I can admit it. Now, in those days, we used to have something called FERA, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, according to which, for reasons which I will not go into for this talk, for every 100 rupees of domestic sales that Hindustan Lever had, it had to have foreign exchange earnings of 10. So that it would be earning foreign exchange and not be a drain on the national foreign exchange. Now, there's a limit to how much shampoo and soap you can export from India. And so we got into what we call non-traditional exports, carpets, shoes, leather garments, textiles, marine products and shrimps, and so on and so forth. In fact, the export director was supervising a portfolio of products for which he had had no training. What he had learned earlier was how to deal with shampoo and soap and dalda. And therefore, we hired into the company people who came from those industries. They brought in domain knowledge, and we brought in the cultural knowledge of how Hindustan Lever does business. And as you can well imagine, the cultural attitudes of people who come from small little partnership firms dealing with shoes and can be different. And I'm not saying this in any pejorative sense. I'm just merely stating that it is very different. So one such person had come into our exports, and I used to believe that you should trust your recruits, take your time figuring out whom to recruit, but then leave him alone, which is what I did. But one fine morning, my CFO rang up and said, boss, we can't find $700,000. It's not tallying in the books. Now, $700,000 may look small in this day and age when people seem to have very good numbers and salaries. But I can tell you, it was a very large number in those days. And more than that, the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act was extremely intolerant of missing foreign exchange, because it was assumed that it has been swindled into some Swiss bank account somewhere. I was in a dilemma. I could do one of three things. The first is, I could say, well, let's get the facts properly. Let's not tell anybody. Keep quiet and carry on and get me more facts. Because all the facts were not known to me initially. The second option for me was, it will go away. These problems are aberrations of an accountant's bookkeeping. It will sort itself out. The third option for me was to blow the whistle on myself. Go to my boss, who was the chairman of the company, and say, I have a problem, I need help. Some advice from other director whom I consulted, I went and told the chairman, I've got a problem, I need help. The chairman said, what's happened? Now remember, the mindset is, I'm 41, I've become a director, I'm a sab janta wala. You're not supposed to admit that you've been a bit foolish. I told him, I don't know what's happened. And so the company's audit department, finance department, legal department, treasury, everybody got into the act. And I'm sure some of them thought I'm a bit of an idiot for having let this happen under my watch. But they all helped me to solve the problem and avoid trouble. At the end of 9 months, we had told the statutory authorities that there's been a genuine human error and closed the matter. We never found the $700,000. And luckily for me, it did not stand in the way of my future career, because I think my seniors appreciated that I admitted the problem and sought help. And that could happen only because of some good advice I got, and from a little sparrow just speaking in my mind, saying it's better to look like a fool to a few people in the company than to look like a criminal to the whole world. Imagine if the media had got hold of it at that time. And it taught me that you always in a position to relearn how to learn. The fact is that you did not know the stuff and you had to relearn, and you had missed a trick. It was an honest error. You didn't pocket any money somewhere, but it's good to admit it. So this was a very great experience for me. The higher you rise, the more you must rediscover humility. That is the first sub-lesson. The second is, when you make a serious mistake, admit it. Don't cover up. When you look around in the public domain at some of the scams that happen, it usually happens that somebody's covering it up. And therefore, more and more people get involved with it. The third is, of course, never stop learning. And that has stayed with me throughout my life, because, and I think it's a good thing for people to do. The normal practice of people is keep quiet, the problem will go away, or push it under the carpet and make sure its head doesn't come out. I did the opposite, and I think it has helped me. So that's my first reset lesson about your learning capability and your humility. I will now go to my reset idea number 2. My reset idea number 2 is try to discover corporate immunology. Now, the word corporate immunology may look a bit pedantic to you, but it's very relevant with the COVID stuff going on. And companies are like human beings. This is the basic principle that I'm coming from. Now, let's take the human body. We are always being subjected to various bacteria, viruses, toxins. Actually, if you look at it logically, there is no reason why the human body should at all survive. There are so many attacks on it. And the attacks are usually from invisible things. You can't see a bacteria. You can't see a virus. So the visible things you're able to take care of. Because what's competition doing? What's the price in the market? Is your distribution good? Those are all the visible things. And you managers tend to do those. But the invisible ones are things they're not able to see and they don't take care of. And what is the invisible toxin or bacteria that I'm talking about? The mood of people, your employees, your associates, your business allies, your shareholders, your entire ecosystem of people for whom you're running the business. They have emotions, they have feelings, and how they feel becomes very important. And if you don't measure it or keep your eyes and ears open, that can become the toxin or the bacteria or the virus that can attack your company. So let me tell you how I got interested in this. Because of this COVID, I started understanding how does the human body actually ward off these things. And a little bit of reading and talking to experts, I found that there are 3 layers of immunity that your body has. This God has created. This is not something you and I have designed. But the design principle may be useful for a company. So the outermost layer is your skin. Your skin acts as a physical barrier and it prevents everything sort of going straight into your lung or your heart. Now the company also has a physical barrier, which is the first level of immunity, which is the engagement of their people. And that's why in a highly engaged company, in a social or a business setting, if you say your company is, and you criticize the company, they will rise to defend the company, right? If you say that there's a customer complaint about your air conditioner or refrigerator, they will say, tell me how I can help. They don't want the company's reputation to be, because they're engaged with the company. And therefore, the physical layer that you have in a company is the engagement of people. We started measuring engagement in Tata's about 15 years ago, or maybe a bit less, as part of the total Tata Business Excellence model. Now, there is a method to calculate engagement. There is a definition, there is a method, which I'm not going to go into now. But just like you have accountants who explain to you what is return on capital employed or what is working capital to sales ratio, this engagement is done by HR consultants. And for the last 20 years, or at least 15 years, HR consultants, the equivalents of the Deloittes or the McKinseys or the Accentures, have been calculating and doing a survey in almost 20 countries, 25 countries, of what is employee engagement. Now, whether the measurement is accurate or not, the trend shows you gives you a message. And I was quite surprised to find, when I got interested in this subject, that irrespective of the country, irrespective of the company, the engagement level on an average seems to be declining. Declining by, a couple of percentage points a year. From 70, it may become 68 and then become 65. But over 15 years, it's come from 70 to 50 or 45. And I was very surprised that this is happening on a macro level. To me, this suggested that there is a toxin or a bacteria or a virus which is affecting the world of business management and people management. And therefore, we started measuring it when I was in Tata's. It's not nothing to do with me. I happened to be there. And I found that the culture of the company would slowly get eradicated, if you keep chipping away at it. And we started to do something about it. So just like the outer layer that you have is your skin, and in the corporate example, it is the passion of your people. In the second layer, it is a culture. And culture is, what does culture in a company mean? Just like in your body immune system, it determines what is a foreign body. If a virus has come into your body, it says, "Ye hamare jaise nahi hai." You reject it. You reject that virus. And then the whole body immune system starts to work to reject it. In the same way, in a company, there is a perception of self, which constitutes the culture of the company. And then they will reject it. And of course, always rejection is not the solution. Very often, it's a bad thing to reject it. But the culture of the company is a second layer. And for example, in this whole COVID episode, a company which is not presumed to have any technology, a consumer product company like Unilever, has come out trumps, because washing your hand with soap has now become a religion in every home. Every child is taught. We never thought it would be important to learn how to wash your hand 20 seconds. And why does soap work on your bacteria and viruses? And soap washing has saved more lives in the world, and I'm giving you the statistics from the last 100 years, than the pharmaceutical industry all put together. Now that's a stunning number. It's stunning to know that soap companies have saved more lives in the last 100 years than all the pharma companies put together. We don't think of it that way. Pharma you associate with relieving people's misery. Soap you don't associate with that. So it is given a renewed purpose and passion, assuming that I was 30 years younger and still in a soap company. And this is what I mean by talking of culture. The third layer you have in your body. So the first layer is the physical layer, the skin. The second layer is the innate layer, which is the DNA of your body. And the third layer is what is called an adaptive layer. The adaptive layer is what makes you respond to threats to your body. And in a company, that is called positivity. Now, there's a professor called Barbara Friedman. She has studied positivity and defined what it means and so on. And she says that if a company or an organization has a positivity to negativity ratio of 3:1, then it's in a good place. Anything less than that requires action. So positivity to negativity ratio 3:1 means people get up and say, listen, there are a few things wrong around here. That's what we are all here to fix. But there are a lot of things which are right for us. And the number of things that are right are 3 times as many as the number of things that are wrong. That's a good positivity ratio. But that's not what you find everywhere. Even in the national scene, as you see now, today in India or America, or Brazil or Britain, people are cynical about the public governance system. And I doubt if the positivity to negativity ratio is 3:1. But that's my opinion rather than any measurement that I have done. So in short, I have suggested to you that if you can attend to the outer layer, which is the people's passion, the innate layer, which is the culture, and the third layer, which in this case is the adaptive layer, which is the positivity, you don't apply your mind to these in the normal course of a day. You normally think this is the job of the HR department. It is as much a job of the HR department as working capital is the job of a finance department. I mean, they can measure it, but they can do very little about it themselves. So I think it's very important, whether you're a consultancy firm, an audit firm, a legal firm, you may have 50 partners, 100 partners, and they may have their assistants to look at these aspects of passion, culture, and positivity to deliver to the organization what I call people power. As the world goes more and more to knowledge, people will be more and more reliant on facts. But the fact is, human beings, culture and positivity and passion will continue to play a very important role. And especially in firms which are professional services firms, you're a bunch of people and their passion and culture becomes very important. So that's my second reset idea, which is a practice of corporate immunology and immunize your company against all these hidden threats that will increasingly come to your company in the years ahead. So I covered 2 reset ideas, and I would like to go through the third reset idea that I want to talk about, which is when do you rely on managerial intuition and when do you rely on management analytics? We are all trained in the way we are educated, in the way society is organized, that analysis and facts are the most important. We are all become left-brain robots. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not suggesting you abandon analysis and fact gathering. So don't get me wrong. But as you rise in the organization, as you start to address more complex problems, you suddenly find the need to create space for intuition. All the facts are telling you something, but somehow your intuition is telling you something different. What should you do? How should you take a decision, assuming the decision is yours? And I faced this challenge when I first became the CEO, as was mentioned by Mr. Menon in his introduction. I went to Unilever in Arabia. I was dealing in a different geography, with a different cultural context, with a different marketplace. And I went through all the facts, but I also made it a practice that what Hindustan Lever had trained me to do, which is go out into the market, talk to dealers, talk to consumers. I would also practice that. Whereas very often in the West, people take their data of market share and penetration of the brand from the computer, and they multiply and divide and they arrive at a number. I found going to the market and listening to people with empathy was very important. And in this process, I found that some decisions that had been taken for implementation just didn't add up. They just didn't add up to my intuition. And I was in a great dilemma because almost $15 or $20 million had been spent on a particular project. And all the data was perfectly good. And yet, when I walked around the market, it looked like the data was not good, was wrong. I resolved the problem by going to Unilever in London and discussing the matter and sorting it out. But I won't go into that. I won't deviate from that. That's all in my book called The Case of the Bonsai Manager. Each time I faced such a dilemma, I ended up researching the subject and writing a book. And that's how the first book I wrote was called The Case of the Bonsai Manager. And when I researched it, I stumbled onto things which were common sense. I should have known it, but I didn't know it. Here I was, a student of physics, engineering, rationality, left brain, highly left brain. And I was asked myself the question, which are the most important decisions you take in your life? And I said, it is whom you marry, whom you stay married to. And did you take that through rational methods or emotional methods, intuitive methods? The fact is that if you carry around a diary and start appraising every potential spouse by their characteristics and arrive at this girl or this boy is 6.7, that one is 7.2, chances are you're going to get into the wrong marriage anyway. So I found that the most important decisions in your life and career you take intuitively. Which company to acquire? You give 5 accountants the exercise, you'll get 7 answers. What is the valuation of that company? Because valuation is a bit of an art, it's not a science. Ultimately, with all the data, you have to take a call and you acquire. And that last bit is intuition. How does the Reserve Bank governor determine interest rates? I mean, he feel offended if he heard me. But he listens to various people, and then it's 25 basis points plus, minus, or stay where you are. I mean, there's a lot of intuition in the way the Reserve Bank governor takes his decision. I'm sure if a Reserve Bank governor was to listen to me, he would think me of making light of his job. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying, how do I select a CEO? The HR department gives me 5 CVs. We call in 5 different people, spend an hour with each. The paperwork is telling you what they have studied, what is their experience. But ultimately, when you see eyeball to eyeball, something tells you this person may be better suited than that person. You may still be wrong, but you go by that intuition. So the very, very important decisions you take are all intuitive. And intuition is not an alternative to analysis. This is very important. People think, should I use intuition or should I use analysis? That's the wrong question to ask. When you've exhausted the power of data and analysis, and you can go no further, then you have to resort to intuition. So think of a person who's walking along and he's got a road map up to a point. Beyond that, there is no map. So he's trying to find his way through the jungle without a map. Now he has a choice. He can turn and come back, or he can intuitively try to find his way through the jungle to get to the other side. That's what I mean by saying they are on the same straight line. They are just different phases of the journey. And this is extremely important. So the question arose, how do you develop intuition? Can you develop it, or does it just sort of happen? And I was very interested. That got me into the whole subject of psychology and meditation. And I found that intuition comes because all the experiences that you have are not necessarily stored in a part of your brain. I gave it a name. I gave it the name BRIM. And BRIM stands for the brain's remote implicit memory. The more emotional your experience, the more left-right click happens and it goes into the BRIM. So if you had a traumatic experience, God forbid, you saw a murder happening, you were only 12 years old, like partition time, that has stayed in people's minds. You went through a very happy marriage, that is a positive experience, it has stayed in your BRIM. You lost a very close friend or relation, that's gone negative, but it's gone into your BRIM. So your BRIM is like a balance sheet of debit and credit notes. And the more emotional they are, the longer they reside in the BRIM. The rational ones go away. And what your brain does is when you are seeking an answer through intuition, it dips into your brain's remote implicit memory and pushes out the experiences that you had, which will tell you this is the right person to be married to, or this is the person you should select as a CEO. You could still come to the wrong decision. And therefore, emotion becomes very important in a senior leader's life. We are all trained not to be emotional. We are all trained to be rational. And yet, we are human beings. You don't have to be emotional. I'm not suggesting that you sit and weep. But that's not what emotion means. Emotion means keeping a space for emotion. I'll give you 2 examples to illustrate my point. Examples always help to set the context. And I was born, although I'm a Tamil, I was born and raised in Calcutta. And because of that, I used to speak Tamil at home. Bengali was spoken outside. English and Hindi were taught in the school. So one was learning quite a lot of languages. About that time, in the 50s, there was a member of parliament, a staunch Hindi chauvinist called Purushottam Das Tandon. You may not remember him. And he was putting a lot of pressure on Panditji at that time, that if Hindi is a national language, from next year, all the IAS exams and so on should be in Hindi. And of course, the South Indians and non-Hindi speaking people were opposed to this. especially the South Indians, because the language would give them a disability and they may not get into IAS and central services exams. And in the South, an anti-Hindi agitation began, and it was quite violent in those days. Panditji solved the problem by agreeing to a compromise that for 15 years, Hindi will be there along with other languages. Now that 15 years, of course, has become 50 years. We still have other languages. And every time somebody opens his mouth and says, impose Hindi, the South again erupts. Now this is the rational part. If you got a national language, it's in your constitution, why don't you just switch? Now see how the problem has been actually solved. Panditji did not call film actors, but Dilip Kumar, Devanand, Ashok Kumar, Raj Kapoor, these people became iconic Hindi film stars. Bollywood came up in the 50s, 60s. They sang nice songs, memorable songs. They ran around trees. They chased pretty girls. And it didn't matter which language they were in. Anybody likes to see boy meets girl, villain arrives, and it all has a happy ending. And Bollywood took Hindi into the South in a manner which Purushottam Das Tandon or his grandchildren could never have done if he had come at it rationally. And this was brought home to me in a very dramatic way because you used emotion to get to people. When I went to a small place in Tamil Nadu, which has got a name which you can't even pronounce, you folks, and people were watching Amitabh Bachchan running Kaun Banega Crorepati. And I was quite struck that in such a small place, people were listening to Kaun Banega. So I went and asked them in Tamil. I said, hey, you guys are all watching this. Do you understand what's going on? And they put on their good South Indian accent and replied in Tamil. They said, sir, when 1 crore rupees is involved, how does it matter in which language it is? Hindi or English is fine. No problem. And this is what I mean by saying when there's an emotion and it touches you, you start to learn things differently. And that I think is a very important lesson. I'll give you another example. Family planning. Many of you may be too young to know that our population was growing at almost 70% higher than the replacement rate back in the 50s and 60s. The replacement rate is about 2.1%. But we were growing at 3 or 3.2% in those days. Now that meant our population was out of control. You had to do family planning. Fine. The first advertisement, DAVP released it in the 60s. It showed a boy and a girl getting married. There was some Shehnai music. And then there was a voice, rather ominous voice, which came and said, Shadi ho gaya, Mubarak ho. Lekin bacche abhi nahi. 5 saal ke baad bacche. And rationally, that's a good message. It flopped. Nobody was willing to accept that message. Why? Because in the Indian social context, if the marriage has happened and there's no result within 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, the social system starts to put a lot of pressure, especially on the poor girl. Why is there no natija? And so to tell them to postpone their first child, in those days, think of the 60s and 70s, when I got married, it was absolutely no-go. And this took 3-4 years of advertising to realize that we are advertising rationally. And what we really need now is to rationalize and to advertise emotionally. What did they do? Very simple. They had the same Shehnai, same people getting married, but the voiceover said, Mubarak ho, have your first child and don't have your second child for 5 years. Now it's a small little shift, but it made a big difference. And today it is not at all uncommon that the couple themselves will decide, let's have the first baby at some whenever they decide. And they may take 5 years or more to have the second baby. And you see how a slight change in the communication made their commercial work. Of course, today our population is almost at replacement rate, though it is still increasing. So, but I'm using this to say how the remote implicit memory works and how you might clash against it if you go purely rationally. So, I've covered 3 lessons so far. Let's see what's the time. Let's do a time check. It is 6:30. Can I ask the organizers whether I should cover one more lesson or should I stop here for questions?
No, please, sir, you continue. Continue, sir.
I'll do one more and then perhaps we'll
Sure.
take the questions. Okay?
Sure.
Otherwise, it's a monologue. I'm talking to myself. I can't see anybody's face. It would be nice to have some interaction. I hope people will send some questions to you, which we can deal with for 15-20 minutes. I want to take one more reset lesson, which, in 2003 or 4, Mr. Tata called me and said, I want to change the culture of innovation in Tatas, not the process of innovation. Why don't you apply your mind to see how to do so? It is one of the most challenging tasks I've been given because I know how to change a process. You can write SOPs and write diagrams and produce knowledge and plenty of books on the subject. But how do you change culture? Today, if you look at public affairs in our country, changing the culture of the company is the most difficult. So I spent 10 years, or I think 12 years before I retired, as the chairman of the Tata Group Innovation Forum, which gave me a lot of opportunity and insight into the process of innovation, the culture of innovation, I got a chance to visit various universities all over the world, Stanford and Harvard and London Business School. I also got a chance to talk to many companies like DuPont or Honeywell or GE, and of course we shared the experiences. And at the end of those 12 years, I felt I had acquired a new insight. So just like I told you, each of my books came out of a new insight. And that insight was, we tend to think of innovation as a process of physics, a logical, we say early stage, late stage, even in venture capital funding, late stage, early stage, middle stage. And we think of it at each stage, you have a stage gate decision making, and that's how we do innovation. Because we are used to this term, putting things into boxes and then ticking off the boxes. But I said, this is not the right model. There's something wrong with this model because it is completely unemotional. It's like an audit. If you're doing audit and you just go ticking the box, you will not get a good audit. You have to interact with people, understand what are the nuances, what are they saying. Likewise, if a lawyer is being briefed on a particular case, he will want to meet the witness and whoever has the problem and try to understand what are the nuances of the case. And I said, innovation is a biological process, not a physics process. And therefore, it's a better metaphor not to look at stages of innovation as with stage gates, but think of it like, how do you raise your child? And that gave me a completely different perspective. And that's when I ended up writing a book called A Biography of Innovations, which was published 3-4 years ago. Now, let me tell you the essential difference. You can say that's also a stage. But when you talk of human beings, you talk of phases. You don't talk of stages. So, what are the phases of a human being? First, you say a fetus is conceived in the womb. Then you say the fetus forms into a child and you deliver a baby, maternity. Then the baby goes through babyhood, infancy, adolescence, and then adulthood. There is no rule that says this must last 1 year. The only thing that's known is it must last about 9 months to become a fetus, to become a baby. plus minus a bit. There's a lot of flexibility. If you have two children in your house, you don't raise them the same way. You follow different methods for them. When we were younger, or when I saw my daughters getting married and having children, I found my son-in-law always looking at his Google to find out what to do if the child is crying. But I found that daughter-in-law, the daughter, just ringing up Shalini, rings up Pantini, who'll ring up Ragini and say, how did you do it? And then they solve the problem. One was a rational way to solve a problem, Google it. One is an intuitive way, just talk to 4 people, quickly get an answer because the baby must stop crying. The same thing happens with innovation. All innovations are not the same. And I found that in many companies, including myself, by the way, all these I made mistakes and learned. You would go through these and say, what happened in stage 1, what happened in stage 2. Whereas what you should really be seeing is, what were the difficulties you had in phase 1? What were the unique cases, the situation that happened in phase 2? And then you find that it is not a logical process, but an intuitive process by which you raise a child, the same way you raise an innovation. So let me take just 2 examples. Let me take the case of flying. As you know, aeroplanes were made only in the 1910 or thereabouts. It's last 100 years of aviation. But it's not a new idea, a new concept. Valmiki wrote in the Ramayana that there will be a Pushpaka Vimana. And he described the Pushpaka Vimana, that has got Vaidurya, it has got various jewelry. He described how it's like a first-class cabin. He has described what the Pushpaka Vimana looked like. So the idea of a heavier-than-air object flying was known to somebody, it occurred to somebody 5,000 years ago. But he managed to convert that concept in his mind into an idea. It's like saying my fetus became a baby. Now, what does it move from a concept to an idea mean? A concept is like a fetus. You don't go congratulate people, hey, congrats on your fetus. You just wait for 9 months and say congrats on having a baby. In the same way, a concept in the brain must be articulated. What is a baby? It's a fetus that has developed close enough to then getting articulated. You see 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a smile, a cry, and you say that's a baby. In the same way, if Valmiki had a concept in his brain, when he wrote poetry out of it, it became an articulation of an idea. But that doesn't mean it's become an innovation. We so often have people fighting about it's my idea, somebody stole. Just because you produce a baby doesn't mean it's going to get the Nobel Prize. So, 3,000 years later, the great Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci started drawing sketches, and those are available in the museum in Paris, where he took birds, he cut their wings, saw the structure of their veins, and tried to replicate that whether humans could fly. No human being volunteered, and he couldn't make a plane. But the sketches exist. So it's a different type of articulation. He drew them rather than made poetry out of it. But it took till 1910 or 12 for the Wright brothers to actually make a model in Kitty Hawk in North Carolina and actually fly it. And then that resulted in. So from the time of the concept in the brain till the time of the prototype, from the time it has taken 4,000 years in that case, right? You take a ball pen. I'll take a very simple. Most people don't think of the ball pen as an innovation. When I started my career, you couldn't write a check with the ball pen. The bank would not honor it. You had to write with a fountain pen. And I'm not talking, I wasn't born 100 years ago, 50, 50. I started my career and had my first bank account maybe 50, 55 years ago. So what is the history of the ball pen? First patent for a ball pen was given in 1888. Just imagine, 1888. Subsequent to that, improvements were made to the patent and a number of patents came out. But nobody had a ball pen. In 1930s, there was a Hungarian guy who used to go to the cafes and talk to people. He was a very curious and creative guy. And he saw from his balcony one day the children were playing with marbles. And the marble would roll on to a puddle of water, and then it would make a line when it came out of the puddle of water. And the idea that a ball would roll in some fluid and create a line occurred to him. He looked up the patents, they were there, but they didn't work. And so he set about making a workable model. Remember, a ball pen is quite sophisticated. The ball must roll in a ink which is viscous. It must be liquid at the time the ball touches it. But when the ball rotates and comes out, it puts it on paper, it will dry immediately, otherwise it will smudge. So there's fine engineering involved there. And then he got a first order from the British Royal Air Force in 1939 because they found their pilots' uniforms were all damaged because they carried a fountain pen here and the fountain pen would leak. Before that, you didn't carry fountain pen because there was no flying. And so they placed an order for 20,000 or 50,000 ball pens. And that's how the name of that Hungarian scientist or Hungarian inventor, innovator, his name was Laszlo Biro, B-I-R-O. And that's why we loosely refer to the ball pen as a biro, even today. But today the ball pen is taken for granted. We throw away more ball pens than we use because nobody uses a ball pen till end of life. More importantly, the ball pen has resulted in further innovations. For example, the roller ball pen, which has a pen-like appearance. When you write with a roller ball pen, it gives a fountain pen-like impression. The computer mouse is nothing but a ball pen. It's a round ball which is moving inside and collecting charges and electrical charges and is moving around. That's how a computer mouse works. You take a deodorant, buy a roll-on deodorant, it's nothing but a ball pen, except instead of going into ink, it is choosing some other chemicals which will help your body to kill the bad odor coming from your sweat. So from a simple idea of a ball pen rolling in a viscous ink, it has got multiple sort of applications. So according to me, the ball pen is a great innovation. And it took from 1888, when the concept was born in the mind, the fetus was made in the brain, it took till 1940 for it to become real. And it's the same with human beings. From the time the fetus is created in the woman's womb, to the time that person becomes successful and the world recognizes. Take Nobel Prize winners. Typically, they find that Nobel Prize winners are between 45 and 50 or 40 to 50 when they do their work, the best work. It takes another 15, 20 years before that work is recognized. So typically, Nobel Prize winners are at the peak of their intellectual capability between the age of 40 and 50. It's true of musicians, it's true of accountants, it's true of even managers. Today, prime ministers and presidents come at the age of 40 to 50, though they may be a little less experienced. And so it's another reason why innovation takes the form of a biological life evolution rather than a physics stage evolution. There are many examples one can go with. I've covered many in the book, but I found this to be a tremendous insight. The moment you change your idea from physics to biology, you get a different view of innovation. And that's how I ended up writing that book called A Biography. That's why I call it a biography of innovation rather than the stages of innovation. So that's my fourth reset idea. I could go on and on, but you'll all be bored to tears. Rishikesh, maybe it's time now to have some questions because it's 6:35. I think I've spoken for almost an hour.
So many questions have started coming from the Zoom app, various chat rooms, what we have in the Zoom, from Instagram, from the Facebook. So I'll just try to quickly collate it and I'll just start throwing at you, sir.
How many people are there on this seminar? Any idea?
Yes, in various 1 minute, let me do a quick compilation of the Zoom rooms. We have 5 rooms. So then in 5 rooms, total is around 473 of all the rooms, 158 and the other is 72, 133 and so on. Then we have many people watching live through social media. So
Okay, good.
I'll just start collating the questions.
Please do that. And I
Yes,
shall
sir.
wait for
So first
questions.
question is very interesting,
Huh.
and definitely with your tons of boardroom experience, I think you will be able to throw some light on it. The attendee is basically asking what will be your advice to be independent directors to tackle COVID situation at the board meeting. Basically, they are, I think, trying to what kind of a reset ideas directors should try to bring in the meetings, in the types of agenda, the discussions, and the so on.
Frankly, I'm not sure that independent directors of companies uh, know much about COVID. For what they can do is to ensure that the company's processes and procedures take care of people first. That's a very important aspect. Management may have plans to slash numbers, cut salaries. That should be debated a great deal. Because that's where directors can contribute. And it comes back to the same immunology. Make sure you don't lose the people who make the magic happen. The people who make the magic happen. Suddenly nowadays you see reports somebody is laid off 30%, 40% of the people. And I think it's a very important thing to remember that the people who make the magic happen are not the managing director and his top team, but the front-facing guy who's out there dealing with customers. So the people aspect is one. The second people aspect has job security or job assurance. It also has the issue of their safety. Don't make them congregate and make them come to work all together. Beyond that, I think the risk analysis of what are the threats to the business, demand is banished, recast the risk matrix made by the company and see whether the management is taking sufficient steps to mitigate those risks. So I would say people and risk, these are the two major aspects that I would offhand think of.
I think very well covered, sir, because Companies Act 2013 also lays lots of emphasis on internal financial control and the risk management. So I think whatever you are saying, I think apart from the concept level, from the regulatory side also the directors are indeed required to do it.
One of the things about risk, for example, is many startups and even large companies don't have enough runway of cash. They got so used to going and pitching and raising more and more money that they are on the treadmill. Suddenly the treadmill is grinding to a halt and the machine will come stopping. So I think it's to focus management's attention on the amount of cash they have, how much cash they must. You see, many Indian companies are raising now through rights issues. That is to bolster the amount of cash they have. You must extend the runway so that your plane doesn't sort of stop after 3 months. And many of our startups particularly, startups, even large companies, run close to the wind, sail close to the wind. And I think boards can concentrate on. So I would add a third item, which struck me as you were talking: the people aspect, the risk aspect, and the cash aspect.
So the next question is the COVID-19 pandemic a unique opportunity to reimagine our future, to recode our business, to re-inspire humanity for a better world?
Of course.
Rather than looking COVID as a negative thing, we can't control it. It has already happened. So let's see positive aspect of it.
Well, you can look at it that way. But, if somebody in your house has fallen seriously ill and got a heart attack, it's unlikely in the middle of that you'd see it as a very positive thing. So it's human nature. Let's be humane about it. If COVID has come and it has destroyed jobs, livelihoods, people will see it negatively. But it's the job of leaders to see how can we use this opportunity to make our company stronger. And that's how the reset idea came to my mind to talk about today.
So the next question is, in this digital technology world, why should government spend tons of money in developing one language while millions are starving? Would you like to say something?
What is one language?
I'll request a participant to further elaborate the question. In the meanwhile, we'll move to the next question.
Is it Hindi or are they talking of some other language?
I think maybe Hindi.
Yeah, but I don't think government is spending oodles of crores in developing Hindi.
So I'll request the participant if he wants to further elaborate the question, he may do so. In the meanwhile, we will shift to the next question. In these turbulent times, how to keep morals and engagement levels of employees high?
You know, empathy and listening. For me, very often in these very turbulent times, people want to be listened to. They don't want solutions. They say, "Dekho bhai, kuch aisa ho gaya hai." You have to lend a ear. We are living in this digital world where everything, time is at a, so we immediately want to give advice. People come and ask me, I'm running out of cash. What do you think I should do? And I listen to the guy. I find it's far more important to give time. And that also gives the other person the feeling. I'll give you one example.
Sure.
In Gujarat, in Anand, the milk revolution was born there, Korean and all that. In the 70s, I think, 70s, when Shastri Ji was Prime Minister, he heard that something is happening. One Malayali chap has come into Gujarat and he's done some wonders. And he was a controversial leader. So there were pluses and minuses. So Shastri Ji wanted to understand this from the farmer's point of view. Of course, there were enough executive assistants to tell him what the Gujarati farmers felt. He said, "No, I want to go and listen to them myself." And so he not only went to Gujarat, he said, "I want to stay incognito in a village in Anand." And Dr. Kurian was horrified. He's referred to this in his book. How can the Prime Minister stay incognito? But Shastri Ji was a very simply dressed person. He said, "बस आप बताइए कि कोई दिल्ली से आए हुए हैं, वो आपके साथ आपके घर में रहेंगे, होटल में नहीं, कोई गाड़ी शाड़ी नहीं." He just stayed the night, had a chat, and he says, "क्या हो रहा है गाय भैंस को?" And he came back convinced that there was some magic going on. And of course, to Kurian's credit, it expanded. Today, India is the world's largest producer of milk. Largest producer. So I think empathy and listening is extremely important. Look what happened in Belchi in Bihar. Mrs. Gandhi was out of power, 1977 or 78. There was an unfortunate attack on some Dalit families. There was murder and unfortunately that keeps happening periodically. Even though she was out of power, she was not the Prime Minister. She took a plane and was the first person to land up at Belchi. And the photo ops were all there. I'm not saying she did it for drama. Some people do this for drama. She might have done it for drama. I have no way to know. But I can tell you the next day, in the absence of social media and black and white television for a few hours a day, and she was out of power, so the black and white television would cover her with Doordarshan. The newspapers were full of pictures of Mrs. Gandhi shedding a tear. And 1 year later, she won the election, not because of Belchi, I should add, but she demonstrated empathy.
Sir, if practical thing, just to second you what you have said, with my limited experience of knowing the Tatas, because I am born and brought up in the steel city of Jamshedpur, and what people are reading in the books of Tata, I have experienced it first life. I don't feel in the world there can be a better example than what you said, than what Tatas do with their communities where they conduct their business. I'm not only talking about the stakeholders, but also the communities in which they conduct themselves. Literally, there has been no strike in Jamshedpur, as per by the long memory goes, except one in the 1920s or 30s. After that, very peaceful the way they have taken their workforce together.
Hello? Are you there?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, we are there. Yes, sir, we can hear you. Please go on. Hello. I'll request the attendees to be with us. I think there is some technical issue. We are trying to sort it out.
Have we lost you?
Sir, can you hear me? Hello.
Please ask him to take off his headphone if he's using it.
No, headphones are not there. I think he's relogging in. He's relogging. I think he's back. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
So
I
I
don't know
was,
whether how about you.
so I was basically trying to say that with my upbringing in the steel city of Jamshedpur, I was very privileged to be seen live what people generally read it in the books. The Tatas is the biggest example what I can see globally, whereby whatever you just discussed, they have taken it practically not only to the stakeholders but also to the communities in which they conduct their business.
That's quite correct. Your observation is much better coming from you than from me.
So as we in Jamshedpurites, whoever we are there in the Jamshedpur, the citizens of there, we always say that for us, the first religion is the Tatas. Whoever you may be, the Hindu, the Muslim, the Christians, the Sikh and the Isai, for us being Tataites is the first religion. That is the impact what Tatas have left not only in the humanity angle, but also towards the environment as such.
That is absolutely a correct statement. I didn't want to eulogize Tatas myself, but what they did when the terrorist attack took place in the Taj,
Right.
what they did when a fire happened on Founders Day in Jamshedpur back
Right.
in
1986.
1987 or thereabouts.
Yes, my sister was also there.
They are all outstanding examples of showing empathy, listening, and humanity. So you're quite right.
So next question, I will take a little on a very in-depth question. I think it's very short question, but a lot of wisdom is there in that. It's more of an observation. To be aware of our own ignorance is the most difficult to overcome. Any tips on how to do that? Overcoming our own ignorance.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that, because I'm not a psychologist professionally.
Right.
But what I can say is what happened in my case, and it happens to everybody, by the way. You get some dhakka, which reminds you. Like I narrated the story of how I got a dhakka. It is the most expensive management course I've attended. I didn't go to Harvard anywhere. Mumbai mein bete, my company lost $700,000. And I learned a lesson out of it. I think learning from your own experiences and reminding yourself constantly that your robe is worth nothing. You know, the graveyard is full of people who thought they were very important and knowledgeable. You don't remember their names now. So I think you have to look inwards and remind yourself. That's the only thing I can say.
One thing which, if I'm allowed to build up on what you have stated and what I think Bharat Modi, one of my first bosses in Bombay, he's a chartered accountant, CFO of a reputed company, and a stalwart in the CA profession, was just asking it. So I'll address it to Bharat Bhai and to you, Gopalakrishnan sir, as well. I think about this, once I have heard Colonel Lalit Rai, the Kargil war veteran, and he famously said that anytime we have doubt how great we are or about anything about us, we should just go to the Himalayas and see and stand in front of the mountains, and then we'll realize how small we are.
Absolutely.
The next question is, sir, one of the gentlemen is asking us, unlearning the learned is easier said than done. How do each one can have a mindset to align to unlearn? Any practical things what you would have seen in your illustrious career, some anecdote or something you would like to share?
You know, frankly, everything that I've said is known to everybody. There is nothing new in what I've said.
Right.
But when you reflect, you'll see that most of the mistakes that are made in the public governance mode or in the company governance are the obvious mistakes. You know, things that are obvious and yet you overlook it. You look at the relationship between a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. Everybody comes from a family. There's something going on all the time, you know. Between a boss and a subordinate, between colleagues in a company. They are very ordinary things that happen to people. But when you're in the thick of it, you tend to ignore the obvious. Like try running, it's much easier to run Tatas or Hindustan Lever than to run a building cooperative society in Bombay. I can tell you. Or a club, you know, where everybody has rights and nobody has any obligations. And you know, some difficult characters will just be difficult. I call Bombay cooperative societies, housing societies, as a unique agglomeration of uncooperative people. Now, you learn from these. These are the ones that teach you. Is there another way to come at it? And it is not something that, falls out of heaven. They are pretty good, decent common sense. But we spend our whole life learning them. So that's all I can add. I can't say anything.
So now we are almost on the closing leg of the 7 p.m. deadline. So few questions we'll be taking before that. So one of the questions coming is a little very interesting in nature. Whatever we have discussed today, how you are very fortunate to have worked with two giants, basically. One being the Unilever, which is a global player, and the Tatas again is a global player, but it is a Deshi, Indian. So how different you find in the culture of both of them, or the philosophy basically?
Both are excellent and fine companies, but they're different. It's like two brothers have come from the same parents. They are both very good boys, but they are quite different. One likes to enjoy and spend money. One is more conservative. One is studious. One is better in sports, etc. I would say that Unilever is a very Anglo-Saxon left-brained company. It's my opinion.
Right.
Tata is a very Indian company. वो दिल का company है. You can fault Tata that they are not clear-headed and analytical. If you are a critic, I am not saying that is true. These are all perceptions. You can say that Hindustan Lever is they observe all the rules, but वो दिल के नहीं है, अकल के है. Now it's a matter of opinion, but I would say those are the kind of differences. It's like having two sons or two daughters, one of whom is very good in painting and art, and one is very good in physics and mathematics. You can't say one is good and one is bad. But I would say ethically, fantastic companies and wonderful places where you can learn, good and bad.
Sir, just to, there is one more question which is more
I
or
want
less.
to just complete this.
Sure.
Having worked in these two, one question came to my mind that these are two institutions, they are not just companies. And how can India create more institutions? And based on that, I got a research project done, and we've covered 6 companies, and 6 books have come out. 3 have come out, 3 have come after the lockdown, where people have created institutions. One is on TCS, one is on Biocon, one is on Larsen & Toubro, and the ones that are yet to come out are HDFC, Kotak Bank, Uday Kotak, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Marico. And so we are given a framework through which people can create institutions rather than just run companies.
Sir, just to build over what you said, why innovation is not so popular or talked about in the companies, especially when I say the word companies, I'm not talking about giants like the Tatas and the Reliance of the world. Or I will just reframe it, how important innovation is for the startups, MSME, if I take it to the next level, or the professional firms as well, maybe a lawyer firm or a chartered accountant or a company secretary, innovation.
Because of, I'm not copying out on this, but because of the nature of the environment and the mahal from which our companies have come,
right?
Innovation was never given a priority. Having contacts and connections was given a priority. We all have lived through that and we know about it, so I won't talk about it. During the last 30 years, Indian companies have been far more innovative than in the previous 30 years. If you compare 1961 to 1991 and compare with that, all these companies have come up post-liberalization. Biocon, Infosys, TCS. And therefore, innovation is like a baby which is growing up. Now, if you want to feed that baby and send him to the gym all the time and try to make a tennis player out of him in 5 years, it will not happen. But I do think that genetically speaking and culturally speaking, Indians are amongst the most innovative in the world. They are very creative. Where they lack is discipline. to force that creativity to come together and create something big. And this is a journey. If I take that biological metaphor, thoda sayana hona hai, and it will happen in due course. You know, it is like the difference between classical music in India and classical music in the West. If you go to an orchestra, in the Western orchestra, there will be 100 people, you know, on the stage. None of them is smiling. They're all very serious. And they sit very disciplined until the maestro comes in, and then they are looking at a script, a hymn sheet, right? They can't go away from that. The script is given to them. You go to an Indian classical music, there will be only 4 or 5 people. One gaika, one violinist, one tabalji. They are not looking at any script. They are almost looking as though वो मर्जी से कर रहे हैं. हंसते हैं, सवाल जवाब करते हैं. All that is going on simultaneously. And therefore, music is a very good way to show. Can you say the Indian musicians are not creative? They are. But are they capable of 100 people getting together? Only in Bollywood. In Bollywood, they will be able to do that. So it's an evolution.
Also, sir, am I right in framing this in today's competitive world, whereby for any product or service, there are other 10 or 15 people ready to give similar product or service? Innovation is the name of the game. If we don't do it differently, it's very tough to survive.
Absolutely. You see another example. When you're short of resources, you become more creative and innovative. We were able to do Mangalyaan or Chandrayaan, I've forgotten, for $750,000 or $75,000. Sorry, I hope I'm getting my numbers right. America did it for $750,000, and it is. I consider it a huge innovation. You know, this bottom of the pyramid. The idea came from an Indian person born and raised in India who went abroad. And even today, you see for PPEs and COVID, the amount of energy and innovation going on in the pharma sector, the PPE and mask sector in India. Today, we are going to be exporters of PPEs. And it will be at a price which is going to be much lower. We are the people who come and say, "Yaar, oh, उस पे चलता है तो इस पे भी try करो." So we are organized. We are not organized enough, but we are creative.
So just one example coming to my mind, in the Tatas, they have a concept whereby the lowest level of worker in a plant, I'm talking about, not a supervisor, but the lowest. वो जो बेलचा मारने वाला होता, अगर short हिंदी में मैं इसको बोलूँ, he is also entitled once a month to participate in that, like you have various departments, coke mills and all that of Tatas over there, to sit with its supervisor and come and give any idea towards the betterment of the process what they're doing. I don't think we can find a better example of innovation, philosophy of a management whereby the lowest person at the lowest level, even who is brooming the floor shop, can come and give an idea towards innovation. So this should be the approach.
Well, it is certainly true of Tata's, but I would hesitate to say we are the pioneers in this. We've done our bit of pioneering. In manufacturing management, now this is a standard thing, you know, through TQM, through Six Sigma, to get people's participation, but we need it on a much wider scale.
Right. So I think, sir, would you like to continue further, or you have some other engagement? Should we stop now? It's almost 7, the scheduled time.
Yeah, I think if it is 7, you can take a last question if you want. If there is one, otherwise we will just close it. And you have a recording of this, you can send it.
Sure. So I'll just request all the participants to be with us for some more time. And just one more information, that post today's session, whatever the discussions are there, in a 2, 3 or 4 days time, we'll be uploading in the YouTube, and then it will be circulated to all. Akash, now I'll request you to please switch on your video. Mr. Menon? Yeah. Now, before I request Mr. Akash Menon to formally offer vote of thanks, we all are there in very difficult times in today's time, whether it's COVID or whatever we see generally. So I deem it fit to just elaborate 4 or 5 lines from one of my favorite songs, Eye of the Tiger, from the Rocky movie, Rising up back on the street, did my time, took my chance, went to the distance. Now I am back on my feet. Just a man and his will to survive. This reset is all about survival. And if we have to survive, the reset has to be there. And now I'll request Mr. Akash Menon to formally offer vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Vyas. And thank you so much, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing you for the last 1.5 hours. And what we've really seen is the experience of close to half a century or more than half a century coming across, and the effortlessness with which you shared those experiences with us. I think for me personally, it's been an extremely enlightening lecture, and it was an absolute pleasure hearing you. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's been truly a privilege to have you with us, and we look forward to further associations with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Udan Saluters and your organization for arranging this. I wish everybody very well, and thank you for spending Sunday evening with me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.